Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take complex subjects and, really pull out those essential insights you need to get fully up to speed.
Exactly.
And today, we're diving into the thinking of former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo. We're drawing from his book, Never Give an Inch.
Yeah, that title, it really sets the stage, doesn't it? It tells you a lot about the perspective we're digging into today.
Mhm.
Our mission for this deep dive is really to dissect the core principles, the key moments of a foreign policy approach that, well, aim to relentlessly defend American interests, and often by challenging the established norms.
So we're going to explore what it actually means to never give an inch in global affairs.
Yeah.
Everything from Pompeo's personal philosophy right through to those really high-stakes diplomatic intelligence operations.
Mm.
You'll hear about the experiences that shaped this, let's say, distinctive approach, the huge geopolitical challenges he had to navigate, and how an America First strategy got translated into, well, actual policy.
Yeah, the tangible stuff.
Exactly. So let's start unpacking this philosophy, maybe starting with the man himself.
Good place to start.
Pompeo often points back to his upbringing in Kansas. He talks about being raised by parents who really instilled in him things like faith, family, honesty, hard work.
Those classic Midwestern values, you might say.
Right. And he even recalls his father's advice, when he was this impatient 20-something, apparently. His dad would say, put your head down, work hard, and good things will follow. Pretty straightforward.
It is straightforward. And what's really interesting is seeing how those personal values seem to translate almost directly into his approach to public service.
How so?
Well, he talks about drawing inspiration from maybe unexpected places, like Justice Clarence Thomas's really defiant stance during his Supreme Court confirmation hearing.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah, he recalls Thomas saying, "I would rather die than withdraw. I will not be scared. I've never run from bullies." And Pompeo suggests this idea, this kind of strength under fire, became a real guiding light for him, especially in those, intense diplomatic meetings.
That makes sense. He also uses this term, pipe hitter. It's quite memorable. What exactly does he mean by pipe hitter? What does that tell us about his style?
It is a striking term, isn't it? He emphasizes, though, it's not really about just being brash or aggressive. For him, it's more about having a winning mentality, striving for excellence, and crucially, not backing down from a fight if it's necessary.
Okay, so it's strategic toughness.
Kind of. And he adds a really important point. Listening more than you speak, gathering the facts before you act. So it implies this intense, demanding approach, but one that's supposed to be fact-driven.
Intensity and facts, not just, well, hitting things. That's a useful distinction. So how does he then take this never give an inch idea and apply it to the, frankly, messy world of international relations?
Well, he grounds it in what he calls realism, restraint, and respect. But respect specifically for American ideals.
Okay.
He argues that American leaders are basically trustees,
Yeah.
right? They're responsible for the nation's happiness and interests. And this means, in his view, you can't compromise those core interests just to be, kind or humanitarian towards other nations. That's a really central point for him.
And his personal faith, his Christianity, that also seems to play a significant role in his worldview.
Absolutely. He's quite open about it. He talks about the belief that every person is created in God's image, possessing inherent dignity. And for him, this translated into a diplomatic imperative. America should use its influence to protect the weak from tyrants.
And he acted on that publicly.
Yeah, he mentions traveling to places with overwhelmingly Muslim audiences like Cairo and Indonesia, and actually starting his speeches by discussing his Christian faith, trying to find common ground, essentially.
Interesting approach. Okay, let's trace his path. He started as a congressman from Kansas back in 2011, then quickly moved to House Intelligence, the Benghazi Committee.
Right, making a name for himself in those national security circles.
But then came a call, he says, from Vice President Pence that really changed things.
Yeah, he describes being genuinely surprised when he was asked to consider leading the CIA. He saw it as an agency that, well, desperately needed strong leadership at that moment, maybe had lost its way a bit.
So how did he prepare for that? It's a huge job.
He dove in, studied the CIA's history, looked at figures like Wild Bill Donovan, who founded the OSS, the precursor to the CIA.
Right, the wartime agency.
Exactly. And his big goal for the CIA was to foster a culture of taking informed risks. He made it clear that he believed any failures would fall on him, not the president, which he saw as necessary for effective American leadership. protecting the Oval Office, essentially.
Okay, so he sets out to reform the CIA, but then, little over a year later, he's tapped for Secretary of State. That's a pretty rapid transition.
It really was a whirlwind.
What were the immediate hurdles he faced walking into Foggy Bottom?
Well, he describes inheriting what he calls a leak machine.
Right.
And morale was apparently quite low after his predecessor, Rex Tillerson.
Right, there were reports about that.
So his first goal was just building a winning team, finding and empowering those career officials he identified as, well, pipe hitters, like Andy Kim, a North Korea expert. He actually pulled out of retirement to lead the Korea Mission Center.
So bringing back experienced hands he trusted.
And he also gives credit to key team members like Ulrich Brickpool. He calls him his counselor and enforcer, someone who could make problems go away.
An enforcer. What does that focus on specific people tell us about how he built his inner circle?
I think it shows a real emphasis on surrounding himself with people he saw as highly competent and, crucially, loyal. He wasn't afraid of heated debate, though. He mentions shouting to challenge ideas with Breck Bull and Brian Bulatow, guys he'd known for 40 years. So deep trust, intense debate.
That makes sense for that kind of pressure cooker environment.
Yeah.
And this leads us to his relationship with President Trump, which seemed pretty unique.
Yeah, by his account, he spent more time with the president than any other cabinet member in that first year, constantly briefing him, presenting CIA findings, recommendations.
What was that dynamic like, according to Pompeo?
He describes their talks as freewheeling and focused on America first, driven by this shared feeling that, quote, it's a mean, nasty world out there.
A shared worldview, then.
Seems so. He mentions the president called him my Mike. And apparently, early on, Trump called him a mean son of a bitch because of his tough stance during the campaign. So clearly a relationship built on a kind of shared, often blunt outlook on the world.
Okay, so we have the philosophy, the background, the team dynamic. Now, how did this never give an inch approach actually play out on the world stage? Where did we see it tested first?
I think North Korea is probably the clearest early example. Pompeo writes about that secret trip he took to Pyongyang where he met face-to-face with Kim Jong-un.
That was a huge deal at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he also paints this really vivid picture of the moment 3 American hostages were freed, hearing them say, America has not forgotten you. And he makes a specific point of saying no ransom was paid, deliberately contrasting it with past approaches.
And during that trip, you mentioned that interaction with the North Korean general, Kim Young-chol. Pompeo called him one of the nastiest men I've ever encountered.
And the general apparently boasted, we have eaten grass for the last 50 years. We can eat grass for the next 50 years. Standard North Korean rhetoric, perhaps.
So how did Pompeo respond?
He shot back, I prefer my grass steamed.
Steamed? What was the point of saying that? It sounds almost flippant.
Well, I think it illustrates that willingness to take a calculated risk, to project strength, not show weakness. That retort, even though it apparently made his own aide laugh, was a signal. The U.S. wasn't going to be intimidated or play by Pyongyang's old script, setting a new tone right from the start.
Okay, shifting gears to Iran. Pompeo saw Iran as the central destabilizing power in the Middle East.
Absolutely central to his view of the region.
And he pushed really hard to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, even with opposition from people like Defense Secretary Mattis and his predecessor Tillerson, who were worried about war. Why was withdrawal so critical from his perspective?
For Pompeo, it was non-negotiable for pursuing American interests aggressively. He fundamentally believed the deal just enabled Iran's bad behavior. Dismantling it wasn't just policy, it was a necessary step in a broader strategy of maximum pressure.
A direct application of never give an inch.
Exactly. Even against the grain of established diplomatic thinking.
Now, a really difficult and controversial moment was the response to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Deeply controversial, yes.
Pompeo acknowledges the intense pressure, both internal and external. He defends the decision not to punish Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, directly, calling it difficult but strategic. What does his account tell us about those kinds of impossible choices?
It really throws the pragmatic, sometimes brutal realities of foreign policy into sharp relief, at least as he saw them. He's quite candid, saying basically, if you wait for the perfect option, it will never come.
Because the world is too messy.
That's his view. It's just too much of a mean, nasty world out there, he writes. For him, breaking ties with Saudi Arabia risked a key security partner in regional stability. It's a stark example of prioritizing hard-nosed national interest, as he defined it, over other major considerations.
That kind of thinking seems to lead directly to the strike against Iranian Quds Force leader Qasem Soleimani.
It does seem like a culmination of that approach.
Pompeo says he'd warned Soleimani directly, attack Americans, and you'll be held accountable. The decision to, as he puts it, pull the trigger came after months of Iranian actions. What does his account suggest about the challenges of using kinetic force as deterrence?
It really underscores the razor's edge leader's walk, doesn't it? Trying to avoid looking weak, but also trying to avoid uncontrolled escalation. The Soleimani strike was about reestablishing what they saw as clear red lines after those provocations.
And the follow-up.
He details how President Trump then tweeted about targeting 52 Iranian sites, a symbolic number, if Iran retaliated further. So, using rhetoric to back up the kinetic action, it's a very clear example of that no-compromise strategy in a really high-stakes situation. Makes you think about the real-world consequences.
Let's turn to Russia. Pompeo's view seems deeply colored by his time as a soldier during the Cold War, serving in Germany.
Very much so. He talks about literally peering across the Iron Curtain and internalizing this idea that America's adversaries are, in ways big and small, always looking to do us harm.
And he connects that directly to current events.
Yes, he explicitly argues that perceived weakness invites aggression. He points to things like the Obama administration's red line in Syria that wasn't enforced, and the Biden administration's stance before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine as examples supporting his belief.
But despite this fundamentally adversarial view, there were these flashes of cooperation. You mentioned the ISIS plot in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, it's a striking story. October 2017, the CIA gets intelligence about an imminent ISIS attack on Kazan Cathedral in St. Petersburg. They alert the Russians.
And potentially saved lives.
Many lives, he suggests, possibly including American tourists. He even got a direct thank you call from Putin himself, who apparently gave him a nickname, Tank Man.
Tank Man. Interesting. Yeah. How does that cooperation fit into the never give an inch framework?
Well, I think it shows that even within that tough framework, specific tactical cooperation is possible when core interests align, like fighting a common enemy like ISIS. It doesn't change the underlying mistrust, but shows a pragmatic willingness to engage when American lives or just basic security are at stake.
But then there was the whole issue of the Russia hoax, as he calls it.
Which massively complicated everything.
He describes it as a political document cooked up by figures like Comey, Clapper, and Brennan, specifically to taint the Trump administration. What was his experience trying to investigate its origins within the CIA itself?
He paints a picture of extreme difficulty. He uses this provocative phrase, saying it would take near waterboarding to get them to volunteer a single fact.
Wow. Strong language.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It conveys a deep frustration with what he saw as politically motivated stonewalling from inside the intelligence community.
Okay, finally, let's tackle China. Pompeo labels China the single greatest external threat to our republic. That's unambiguous.
Couldn't be clearer.
What specific Chinese actions does he focus on? What does he term economic warfare?
He covers a lot of ground there. Obvious things like intellectual property theft, but also efforts to control global tech through companies like Huawei. That's what led to his Clean Network initiative, trying to secure U.S. tech infrastructure.
And influence operations.
Yes. He points to concerns about Chinese influence in American universities, even reaching down to state governors through groups like the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries, seeing it as a multi-front threat.
And on human rights. He's been very outspoken there.
Extremely. He calls the atrocities in Xinjiang against the Uyghur Muslims the stain of the century. And he also goes into detail about the CCP's cover-up of COVID-19.
Right, the early stages of the pandemic. Does he assign blame domestically as well?
He does. He alleges that figures like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins played roles in downplaying or suppressing discussion around the lab leak theory. He ties this directly to the CCP's initial lack of transparency and suppression of warnings, like from Dr. Li Wenliang. Sees it all as part of a dangerous pattern.
Beyond condemnation, what actions did they take regarding China?
He points to concrete steps on Hong Kong decertifying its special autonomous status, and on Taiwan increasing arms sales, sending the highest-ranking State Department official to visit in decades, which definitely angered Beijing.
And what about that TikTok comment? That seemed very Pompeo.
Oh, yeah. He recounts warning people, only if you want your private information in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
And he seemed almost surprised that it caught on, saying American moms used the clip to get their kids off the app. A very direct, maybe even blunt message cutting through.
So it wasn't just about confronting adversaries. This never give an inch idea also applied to building new alliances, challenging old ways of thinking.
Exactly. It wasn't just defensive. It was also about proactively reshaping things. And the Abraham Accords are probably the prime example.
Those historic normalization deals between Israel and several Arab nations, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, huge shift.
A massive shift.
Yeah.
And Pompeo argues they were built on three key pillars. The America First outlook, recognizing Israel as a vital ally, and crucially, this widespread regional recognition, especially among Arab states, that Iran was the main destabilizing threat.
Interesting combination of factors.
He highlights working closely with people like Sheikh Tahnoun of the UAE and the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who he apparently nicknamed Sledgehammer
Sledgehammer.
for his willingness to just break through political logjams, apparently. Again, that emphasis on decisive action.
He also pushed hard for the partnership between the U.S., Australia, India, and Japan.
Yes, reinvigorating that was key for him as a counterweight to China.
What did he see as the foundation for its success?
He credits Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as the real father of the Quad. And he points to India's significant shift away from its traditional non-alignment, largely pushed, he argues, by China's own aggressive behavior, like those border clashes. He saw it as a natural grouping of democracies needing to work together in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, even seemingly out there ideas got considered, like buying Greenland.
Oh, yeah, that one got a lot of headlines.
It didn't happen, obviously, but what was the strategic thought behind it? Did anything come from it?
Well, the purchase idea fizzled. But the underlying strategic interest in the Arctic was real. It actually led to the U.S. increasing its presence there, opening a consulate in Greenland for the first time since the Eisenhower administration, and starting work on new icebreakers to counter Russian and Chinese activity. So the headline idea was maybe splashy, but the strategic follow-through was there. Shows a willingness to think unconventionally.
And this willingness to try new things, it even extended to domestic policy that impacted foreign relations, like border security.
Right. He talks about the Remain in Mexico policy, officially the Migrant Protection Protocols,
Yeah.
requiring asylum seekers to wait in Mexico.
Very controversial policy. How did he view its effectiveness in foreign policy terms?
He claims it worked magnificently, despite resistance from Mexico initially and lots of criticism. For him, it sent a strong message of deterrence, projecting American resolve on its own borders, which he believed directly strengthened America's hand internationally, connected domestic strength to global credibility.
Of course, leading with such a forceful, unapologetic approach meant he was constantly under fire.
Constantly dealing with incoming, as he puts it.
He even describes the State Department itself at times as a kind of union-led, passive-aggressive establishment leak machine trying to block the America First agenda.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong criticism of his own department.
It is. He recounts facing what he calls unprecedented coordinated resistance, especially from lawyers within state, for example, when he moved to decertify Hong Kong's autonomy. He clearly saw significant internal friction.
And then there was the very public firing of the State Department Inspector General Steve Linick. How does Pompeo justify recommending that?
He defends it quite strongly. He accuses Linick of unprincipled behavior and ethical issues. For Pompeo, removing him was necessary for accountability and to ensure the IG's office wasn't, in his view, obstructing the administration's goals. Another example of confronting obstacles head-on, internal or external.
And beyond internal battles, the media criticism was relentless.
Oh, absolutely. He writes that the administration basically became almost totally insensitive to the demands of disingenuous Democrats and the legacy media. Just tuned it out, essentially.
He even recounts that moment after the 2020 election where he very deliberately told reporters there'd be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. He admits saying it with a "screw you" in his voice.
Yeah, that was incredibly provocative.
How does that kind of defiant communication fit the never give an inch philosophy, especially in such a tense political moment?
Well, it's a pretty stark illustration of it, isn't it? For Pompeo, it seems he was about refusing to play what he saw as the media's game, preventing them, in his mind, from driving a wedge between him and President Trump. It really highlights that unyielding approach, asserting strength, controlling the narrative as he saw it, even if it meant alienating huge swaths of people. Public perception wasn't the primary driver.
So looking back at his tenure through all the controversies and the pressure, what does Pompeo say was the ultimate motivation? Why endure what he calls that grueling test of endurance?
He really emphasizes that, for him, never giving an inch was about serving America. It wasn't about personal gain, reputation, self-preservation. He describes himself as vicious, relentless, manic, determined when it came to top priorities, but always gives credit to his team.
And he felt that resolve surprised people.
He notes that his ability to just stay the course and, in his view, deliver for the country baffled critics. Critics who, he suggests, expected him to eventually sell out Trump for future glory and money. For him, it was fundamentally about sticking to the mission.
Well, this has certainly given us a deep dive into a very distinct perspective on American foreign policy. One built on deep conviction, a real readiness to challenge the status quo, and that constant theme, never give an inch when defending what he saw as America's core interests.
Indeed. You see it threaded through everything, freeing hostages, confronting rivals like Iran and China, forging new alliances like the Abraham Accords, even battling the bureaucracy here in Washington. The narrative is consistently one of a leader who saw the world as a tough, mean, nasty place and believed America had to respond with unambiguous strength and deterrence.
So for you listening, what are the takeaways here? Thinking about how we all navigate information today, how might Pompeo's focus on telling the hard truth as he sees it and operating in a world he describes as full of disinformation, how might that apply to how you consume and judge information yourself?
That's a really important question to think about. Pompeo talks about learning in Congress how to distinguish good intelligence analytic work from information that might just be politically neutral or well-reported, but perhaps lacks deeper analysis or context. In today's world, with information flooding at us, often highly charged, how do we make those kinds of distinctions? How do we separate the signal from the noise?
Something to definitely chew on as you continue your own deep dives into the world around you. Thanks for joining us for this compelling exploration today on The Deep Dive.